Good afternoon, everyone. We're so glad that you're here for this session, and we're looking forward to hearing from our mixed choir clinician for this all-state chorus. Her name is Dr. Julie Yu from Kansas State University. And so without any further ado, Dr. Julie Yu.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Can I just say LMEA knows how to run a conference. I tell you what, I've been so impressed with the leadership, and of course, our huge thanks to Conselmer and everybody for helping us with this conference. It's just a pleasure to be here. I'm going to get right into it, and my presentation is about how music is taught and we work on it is normally a linear process. I have noticed that we tend to think, okay, I'm going to teach this and this and this and this. In fact, I have a grad student that is from Louisiana, and he was just talking to me about Bloom's taxonomy and scaffold learning and about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and all that he learned while he was in Louisiana. And it was just really impressive to hear all those things. And I think we think about this step-by-step process. But today I'm going to ask you to change it up a little bit and start thinking about maybe how things can be taught in a circular process, or at least how it goes through your mind. So in a typical rehearsal, ask yourself, let's say you have a new piece of music that your students are learning. Is there a process that usually you take them through? On the musicianship side, do you maybe decide, hey, we're going to solfege the whole thing, or we're going to count out the rhythms? On the musicality side, do you say, let's listen to a recording, and so on and so on? So think about your typical way of just introducing music or teaching a concept. So now I'm going to ask you the idea of teaching this concept right here. All right. So think back to yourself and say, self, how was I taught the concept of a dotted quarter or a dotted half note? Give you just a second to think about that. All right. Some of you might have remembered hearing something like this. A dot after any note extends the duration of the note by half of its value. For example, a whole note gets 4 beats. Adding a dot to the whole note will add another 2 beats. Half the whole note's value, meaning a dotted note gets a whole note. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know about you, but if I was starting off in music and someone told me that to figure out a dotted half note or a dotted quarter note, I would be like, no, thank you. I came to choir to sing. I came to be around my friends. I came to go on trips to New York City. I didn't sign up for this. And I would agree with them, right? Especially when these concepts have been something that's been a part of their lives since they were a wee young child. So for example, can you think of any songs? Of course, we're dealing with compound meter here. So can you think of songs that are in 6/8, 9/8, 12/8 that little kids would know? One might be Row, Row, Row Your Boat. There's all kinds of examples. Here we go round the mulberry bush, so on and so on. And so why are we taking this concept that students and children already know, and also we're making it so much more complex and as something that might turn them off from the process of doing this? And frankly, I even have trouble following this definition. So again, we're going to teach this concept. So I know some of you in the room know what I'm talking about when we teach it from a concept of compound meter versus simple meter. And I'm only using this as an example of that issue of linear learning versus learning circularly. So think about, what's the first rhythmic value that we often teach in schools? Well, it's usually done through this hierarchy here, the hierarchy of the duple division. Right, we start with maybe quarter notes and we say, here is the beat. Well, the problem with that, of course, is imagine what happens if we say, oh no, now the beat has changed. The pulse has changed. And so we all know this duple hierarchy, but what if instead of just teaching all the duples first, then moving into, simple meter, and then moving into compound, what if we showed 2 charts at the same time? What if we showed this chart as well as the other ones? And instead of saying a dot after a note gives you half the value of the note added to that previous note, we say instead a dot after a note means that you just have 3 of the next smallest division of notes. And I think in that case, students will now learn that our pulse can be a dotted whole note, or it can be a dotted half note, or it can be a dotted quarter note, et cetera, et cetera. And I know this to be true, that the way we teach music often forces students to become more afraid of music, because I teach at the collegiate level, and when they come for oral skills, if I hand them something in 4/4 versus 9/8, they're going to struggle a lot more with the 9/8. Also, if I give them something in 0 sharps or flats, they're going to ace it. But you put 5 flats in the key signature and they think the world is coming to an end. They forget who they are. They forget where they've been. They don't know who their mama is. It's crazy how students just lose their mind. And I think that's because of the way we teach them. So we need to look at the definition of musicianship. And I know that's what we all strive for in our classrooms, is to make musicians out of our students, right? I remember teaching a class, and I was the pianist for an opera, and I went to a rehearsal and they brought in the orchestra. And what they said, they were trying to set up, and someone said, "Maestro, where would you like us to set up?" And he said, "I would like the singers on this side of the room and the musicians on this side of the room." And I remember thinking from a young age, I was like, okay, singers are not musicians. And so it has been my life goal to make sure, well, one of my life goals, the other is to keep my 10-year-old alive. But one of my goals is that my singers will be musicians. They'll be recognized musicians. So taking a look at this definition, we know that we're trying to teach the knowledge and the skills needed for being a productive member of our ensembles. The other part of that is, of course, musicality. And on this one, the funny thing is, when I go to watch a choir rehearse to do these clinics and things like that, I often notice that they'll live in one of these two camps. And one is that they'll really teach the musicianship side, and they'll be the clappers, and they're going one eanda, two eanda, and bottom tum tums, and they're doing do re mi and all the hand signs and all that. But then they say, maybe 2 weeks before contest, they'll say, "Doctor, you come into our choirs and take it to the next level." And they haven't talked about text or like how the harmonic function is, or the extra musical decisions. But sometimes teachers will be in the other camp. Well, you'll come in and boy, do they feel the mess out of that music. I mean, it's just oozing out of their pores, they're moving and they're emoting and they're doing all these things, but good luck trying to find a steady pulse, right, in order to do that. And are they doing it together? And so the idea of circular teaching is that we have to, of course, balance the yin yang. Okay, I'm Asian, so that's really important to me, is the balance of musicianship and musicality together throughout the teaching process. Not, we're going to just do one, okay, now let's throw in the dynamics at the end, so on and so on. It is possible to expect it all from the beginning. So I'm going to read these 2 quotes to you. When you read or hear something, think about it and how it connects to everything else you know. This is how knowledge will become useful to you. Don't simply collect facts. You'll only forget them later because they aren't relevant to your life. So we're going to do a little exercise here. I'm going to teach you my social security number. No, of course not. I wouldn't give you my real social security number, but I'm going to give you a fake one. So the first 3 numbers of my fake social security number are 214. The second number is 11. The second part, excuse me. The first part is 214 and then 11. And then the last part is going to be 1918. Now, if I said, please memorize 214111918, many of you in the room are doing what we know our students should be doing. 214, can you think of a way to remember that number? Well, I think of it as February 14, which is Valentine's Day. So I think, oh, I'm going to think of a little heart right there. Then the next one is 11. And that happens to be the month that we're in right now. So I say, okay, November. So I'm going to say, I'm going to do a little heart. And then in my mind, I have a little calendar for right there. Then in the last set, I said 1918. And unfortunately, we can think of that as the 1918 flu pandemic. So maybe I'm thinking of a little syringe right there, or a mask. Okay, so then I have these visual images with these numbers that I'm trying to remember. And I can think also that I want love to come first, and I want it right now in November, and we're going to get over the flu pandemic. Maybe I'm thinking those things. So putting data and information into something that's relevant and special to you. And really, we're talking about special to the students, of course. We want to involve the learners in the process. So Benjamin Franklin says, teach me and I forget. Tell me and I forget, excuse me, teach me and I remember, but involve me and I learn. And my major professor used to tell us all the time, he'd say, they're not going to remember the definition, of a hemi, semi, demi, quaver, but they sure are going to remember how they felt in your class. And I think that to be very true. So imagine if we're teaching music, if we can get in on their involvement right from the beginning, what a great process that will be. So now we're going to put this into practice. And I sure hope you can hear my piano, but I'll go ahead and sing the notes as well. So right here, we have 5 different notes that a singer could sing on this section of A Boy and a Girl by Eric Whitacre. And so if you're a first soprano, no, let's start with the basses, of course. So we have your bass to a boy and a girl, or if you're a baritone, a boy and a girl. If you're a tenor, a boy and a girl. If you're an alto 2, a boy and a girl. If you're an alto 1, a boy and a girl. If you're a soprano 2, a boy and a girl. If you're a soprano 1, a boy and a girl. And so if you heard it all together, it'd sound like this. Imagine teaching this to your class, to your choir, and we did it just like I did, which is rote teaching. And I said, okay, another way, of course, that you could do it would be to have them sing it on solfege, et cetera, et cetera. So if you were to take these 5 little words here and decide that you were going to develop a lesson around it, I would imagine that a lot of teachers are going to be spending most of that time chasing notes. And you all know what I'm talking about. The rhythms are pretty simple, but chasing just the notes and making sure that all, 6 notes are represented in boy, for example. So if you're thinking about a circular process to teaching this section, you would want to, of course, put it into context that relates to them. All right. Well, one way that you can do is to make sure they know how they relate to another part. Okay. So my husband, I teach with him at Kansas State University. He's the other choral director. And he does this thing where 2 voices, he'll rehearse 2 voices at a time, and he'll make them sing with each other, not make them. He asks them to sing with each other. And then what they do is they're listening while they're singing, because we all know great choirs are great listeners and hearers, not just great singers, right? So if the 2 parts are singing, he calls it hear singing, where you're listening while you're singing. And then you repeat that process, and it's re-hear singing. Do you get it? Rehearsing, rehearsing. Yes. And I know it's not a revolutionary idea of doing 2 parts together, but the way he does it really makes the students understand it's more than themselves. It's like I always tell my students, if I'm invited to a party, especially around Halloween, I want to know, is it a legitimate costume party? Am I going to look weird dressing up as a hot dog when everybody else is kind of just in, like nice dinner party wear? You always need to know the context of how you fit into a group or into a room or so on and so on. So this idea of rehear singing is a circular process, because what we can do is this. So for example, if we were to have the alto 1s and the bass 2s sing together, you would hear this. pretty consonant. And I might even play it like in the same octave. Oh, sorry. And they would go, oh, that's nice. We can sing to that, no problem. Now let's do alto 2 and basses. So we have. And so they might realize, wow, there's something crunchy happening on the word boy. And then on the word girl, they're consonant, which I think is a really lovely idea, right? Boys are from Mars, girls are from Venus. No, I don't know. But again, that's putting it in a context for me. So when I sing that part and I go, oh yeah, I remember this is crunchy, but this feels good, because we're in unison. Same thing, of course, on soprano 2 and tenor. Then consonant unison here. Okay. And then I might ask him questions like, on the word boy, can you tell me which 2 parts sing in unison at the octave? And they would, of course, view the score and they would say, oh, the tenors and the sopranos both sing C's on the word boy. And I'd say, good job. And I'd be like, so when you sing that, tenors and sopranos, can you listen across the room and make sure that unison's just pristine? So on and so on. I know you know what I'm talking about in this, but what if we approach music immediately from that, rather than saying, okay, basses, let's go through your part. Okay, now tenors, let's go through your part. What if we skip that linear process and went just right to the circular right away? What if we didn't sing all the way through the piece and one day we just opened up the score to these 5 notes? And then what if we told them on the first chord, can somebody tell me what the position of the chord is? How would you name the chord? And they would say, is it major or minor? You could start with that question. You don't have to wait until they know the notes to be asked those questions. You don't even have them look at the music and you say, is that, what kind of chord is that? Now, what if I did this? So what is this one? And they'd say, oh, that's minor. And you'd say, yes. Now, what about this chord? And they'd say, oh, that sounds major. So we go from minor to major. And you say, yes. We go from here to here. Okay. And then you'd say, oh, but there's these weird notes, right, in the word boy. So we have do, mi, so, re, right? And then we say, oh, then we teach the concept of extended chords. Because how can you teach Whitaker, Yellow, Antonini, Essenwald without your students having an understanding of extensions? Shame on you if you do, because it's the root of what they do, no pun intended, right? So then we say, if you have a property of do, which are our basses, would you sing that? And they sing do, then maybe you sing the 5th to tune that open 5th. So, and then you say, I drop the mi, and then you sing, who's got the re? Now who's got the really cool fi? And then you say, listen to what it sounds like if we play it out of the regular. That sounds very different from. But that's the same chord. And Whitaker put it really close together. And we say, why do you think that is? And you would have read the text and you would have noticed that you sing the words boy and girl many, many times. The one time you sing it, they're sitting on a grass, right? And they're having a picnic. And the next one, they're eating oranges, right? And then in the final part of the song, they're underground because they're dead. And so you talk about these things, and we talk about where this is in the song, and we say they're slowly getting lower and lower into the ground because maybe they've grown old together and they died together, or maybe one of them has passed, or maybe there's been a tragedy and someone that they love has passed, or it's maybe that their love has gone away, that it has died, or so on and so on. But that means so much more when they sing, oh, boy, and I would, of course, have them listen to that D major with the, right? The about 7, 9 right there, I would have them listen to that chord and say, oh no, that sounds like they're in bliss, right? They're in heaven there. So you would talk to them and you would have them think about it. But why do we spend so much doing the hear singing? Because if this chord doesn't balance, right, the audience wants nothing to do with it. If they sing insensitive, the audience will know. If that chord is sung out of tune, you'll lose the audience right away. And that might not be, I know I'm talking about mommies and daddies who are going to love their kid no matter what notes they sing on stage, but there needs to be a visceral reaction that happens when you hear that chord right there. And Whitaker writes it so. And the way we can do that is if we do the musicianship parts of balance, tuning, which you're not going to be able to tune something. And let me just give you a freebie here on behalf of LMEA. The fastest way to fix tuning is for them to know their function in the note. If I know that I'm the third of that chord, it's different from me knowing I'm the root. And if I'm the fifth, and knowing where you are in your range is another part. So then the musicality part was that part that I'm telling you about, knowing how it relates to the whole story and putting it into the perspective of the students and where they are on love and loss and what it means to be a boy and a girl sharing oranges on a blanket. And of course we tell them, no, you're not allowed to do that, not until you're 30 years old. Okay. Leave a little bit of room for Jesus. Am I right? Okay. So the Styles program, I'm going to tell you about this. At Kansas State University, we used to have this thing called the Styles program. And what was the Styles program? Well, a student, let's say in their sophomore year, would take history classes. But in that history class, they would only learn about classic period. Okay, only learn about classic period, about 1750 to the 1900s. And so in their theory classes, they would learn about sonata allegro form, and they would learn about the typical form of a symphony, or they would learn about, a mass and how Mozart's masses would have been written, and so on and so on. In oral skills, they would do functional harmony that was typical to classical styles. They might learn about like arpeggiations and ostinato chords and things like that. Maybe some secondary dominants thrown in there. And then in applied lessons, they would sing music that is from the classic period, and they would perform it. And then in their research projects, they might do research or compositions to create a little sonatina in the style of Haydn, or so on and so on. So the Styles program was very immersive, where the students really learned about a period of historical performance and really implemented that throughout all their classes. The trouble came, let's say you have a student who transferred in. That'd be very tricky because let's say they transferred as a junior. Well, if they didn't come from the Styles program, maybe they only learn about 19th century music and Renaissance music, and then they graduate. So you can imagine there were some drawbacks to the Styles program. But the one thing I loved about it was putting everything into context. So you're not just, in your history classes learning about Schoenberg, and then all of a sudden in voice lessons you're singing about, singing some Rameau or Purcell or something like that. It was like you were highly immersed in this process. Well, I think that's how we should teach concepts as well, is to put it into as much context as possible. That circular little delivery that we give to the students, rather than teaching things that are just out of sorts and just in this linear process. Just like Target, gosh, I love Target. I'm not sponsored by Target, but if they would like to sponsor me for future conferences, just call me. Okay, so Target's motto is expect more, pay less. And I think this is a great motto for us to expect more from our students. And then that pay less part is we do less as the teachers. So we expect more and we do less. So what does that mean? Well, the work comes, of course, as you know, in the score study and in the planning and all that time that's that a lot of students when they come to university have no idea what you guys do when you're not standing in front of a classroom. And then boy, do they learn that at the university when we say, oh, guess what you have to learn? You have to learn how to budget. You have to learn how to fill out forms. You have to learn how to do a purchase order because they don't know you guys do these things. They think you just walk in front of a room and create magic, right? And so what we do, of course, is the work behind the scenes. But then a lot of teachers continue to work really hard in front of the students. And I will often go in and do clinics with choirs. And it's amazing how it's the Julie Yu show. And the backup dancers and singers are those students in the choir. And the teacher is up there just, woo, woo, look at me, wah, 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 wah. Okay, nothing to see here, you know, and all this. And it's just, you think, how in the world does this teacher do this? And then go home and raise a family and do their taxes and wash their car and everything else. But then I also see teachers who do this process of doing less and making their students do more. So going back to a boy and a girl, can you remember, excuse me, I'm ahead of myself. Going back to a boy and a girl, expecting more, pay less, that is another thing where instead of me teaching them that, I think, okay, basses, you're going to sing down a major third from that, and you're just going to sing mi, do, okay? Or you wouldn't sing that for them, and they would figure it out, and then you'd go so on and so on, and you'd have them figure out the notes themselves rather than us feeding it to them. So it's that idea of expecting more and also doing less, or expecting more from them and making them do more. So when you expect more from a student, one thing that I think you should always do is work toward memory and retention right from the beginning. So the question is, can you remember that social security number, that fake social security number I gave you at the beginning? Of course, the answer was 214-11-1918. Right. And so my voice teacher, when I was starting off, she would always say, Julie, if you sing through anything in my studio, I expect it to be memorized the next time you sing it, if it's just a little phrase. And I'd say, oh, my gosh. Well, boy, did that make me turn on those brain cells like crazy. Just the expectation that nothing was ever to be done just for the sake of doing it. Okay, she always made me relate it to something that I would work toward memory. In rehearsal, they do more, you do less. You get that idea, right? What if on that first chord, if I just gave him the first note and said, you figure out the rest of the notes, boo, ba, right? And then if you give them, if you say to them, instead of saying, hey, everybody, take out the piece with the blue cover. What if we said, everybody, take out the piece that's written by the 19th century composer of opera. And they would look through their music and say, Puccini? And you say, yes, that's it. And so on and so on. You make them do the work instead of feeding it to them. Finally, the idea of cognitive dissonance. I talk about this a lot in my teaching and such, but without cognitive dissonance, your students really are not learning anything. And I'll tell you an example. When I was a piano student, my freshman year, I walked in and the piano teacher had told me, I need you to learn all your scales, 2 octaves at metronome equals 100 or whatever. And so I walked in and I was super prepared and I said, okay. And so on, and I did it. And I was so proud of myself. And then the teacher said, okay, that's good. Why don't you play G major in your left hand and maybe A flat major in your right hand? And I thought, are you crazy? What are you talking about? So I'd go. And then I'd get through it. Barely. And then she'd say, okay, that was good. Now, why don't you sing D major in your voice? Do, re, mi, fa, she'd say, okay, now with your foot, go da, 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 while you're playing that. And you can guess what I was doing by this time. Having full-blown panic attack in a fetal position on the floor. There was no other right answer. And she leans over me, this little 4'11" woman, okay, from Poland, leans over me and she says, now you're learning something. She said, because earlier you just showed me what you already knew. You showed me what you had practiced. But during these lessons, to get your money's worth, I have to push you until you say, I can't do this right now. And coming from that point of view, every lesson I knew, ooh, I cannot just go in there and sight read something or pull it off because she can see through me like crazy. Music is all about cognitive dissonance, isn't it? We're asking the students to do a billion things at the same time. Well, why not expect that of them right from the start and get them in that process already? So I'm going to have you do some exercises with me. I'll have our students do this during our LMEA honor choir when we come together, and you practice it so you can make sure you can do it for them, with them. All right, so this is from Bob Ward at Ohio State University. He taught me this. So thumb up, and you point with one hand, no thumb here, and then you're going to switch. And then you're going to switch. And only one thumb is sticking out. So no pew, 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 or anything like that. And we're just going to switch it back and forth. And while you do this, if this is too easy, then you know you're not reaching cognitive dissonance, right? So we're going to do maybe like, let's do the alphabet backwards and counting down from 26. So we're going to say Z, 26, Y, 25, X, 24, W, 23, so on and so on until you reach cognitive dissonance. Now, let's say you have no problems doing that. Then let's do planets from the sun, and closest to furthest, we'll say Uranus, to be very PG here. And then we'll do colors of the rainbow, Roy G. Biv. So you might say Mercury, red, Venus, orange, Earth, yellow, so on and so on. Okay, until you reach cognitive dissonance. And the words are not, I can't. If our students say that, you say, that's not in your vocabulary. Okay, you say, I can't right now. You keep working on it. Okay, I say, yes, there are some things you can't. Like if I were to say, go on the roof, jump off until you can fly. No, that's not acceptable. But this, they can do. Just can't do it right now. Okay, another one would be, okay, everybody hands on your head, hands on your shoulders, hands on your hips, head, shoulders, hips, head, shoulders, hips. That's A. Now here's B. Head, shoulders, hip, shoulder. Head, shoulder, hip, shoulder. That's B. So let's do A, then B. A, B. Okay. And now you might say, okay, now let's do A, B, B, A. So they go A, B, B, A. Okay, and you say, great, you're doing great on that. Maybe you leave a longer pattern that you write on the board of A, B, 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 A, B, B, so on and so on. But you don't let them talk, and you just keep a steady pattern. And then they're kind of looking at each other, and they're saying, am I doing it right? And you say, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. No one's judging you whether you do it right or wrong. You just got to think and activate that brain. Now, what if we did one hand A and the other hand B? So we're kind of going back and forth. Okay, I think I did it wrong, but you get the idea. So this idea of cognitive dissonance is really, really important. Okay, the reason I'll drive home one more time is that there is a astrophysicist named Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was on a quiz show, and on the quiz show, they asked him silly questions, 3 questions about like the Kardashians or something. He got them all wrong. And the co-host said, ha, 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 by the virtue of that, I'm now the smartest man in the world. And Neil deGrasse Tyson said, oh, yes, 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 you are. And he said, but see, this is the difference between you and me. He said, you see it as I missed 3 questions. Or maybe he missed 2. And Neil deGrasse Tyson said, I see it as I learned 2 new things today. And isn't that what we want for our students? Not that they leave our classroom saying, boy, did I sing the mess out of those notes and rhythms. But my goodness, wasn't that something today? The sense of community and the balance we got on that chord, and the way I knew that me knowing my part really lended to the environment that I was singing in. They're going to remember how they felt, not what right notes they sang. This is my favorite quote in the entire world, and I'll just give you a second to read it. I use it in every presentation I do because it is truly what gets me through each and every day. It's really hard to teach a class and to come out of it going, I nailed it. Every day is at least one period of the day I'm thinking, am I in the right field? And I just want you to know that I have to live with this thought that every day is knowing that I have a fresh new start. And I like this image of this being in a circle because I try my hardest to remind myself not to be so linear in my teaching, not so product oriented, but process oriented. And that the students leave every day just because I get to work with a lot of non-music majors who are there for a vacation and not a vocation. And getting to work with them and hopefully enriching their lives and filling their souls, but pushing them to the degree where the music major sitting right next to them is also challenged and is equipped for the reason why they're there. So you have the future in your little hands, but every day you get to determine where it is that you start. And I hope that you'll consider going from a linear process to a circular one. So at this time, I will stop my presentation, and I'm going to ask Greg to help me with any questions and comments that you might have regarding this or anything.
All right, vocal people, come on, type some stuff in the chat part. Ruth, thank you for the comment that it's valuable. I agree. I know you're excited as I am to have Julie join us in March. Let's all keep our fingers crossed and hope that she is able to join us. We're looking forward to that happening. My mantra this year is a semblance of normalcy. Michelle Deslatis is also a valuable teacher, one of our teachers. Ruth, you're going to have to type in your last name. But she says, thank you so much for your great insight into a new way of teaching. I don't know. All right. There. Gurgle. Is that, well, I hope I pronounced that right. She says I'm a professor.
And she is. And she's one of the greatest music educators I've ever met. I just want to say. There
you are. It's weird. When I was growing up in middle school, that was actually my nickname. Everybody called me Professor. Ruth says no. Ruth says no. All right, we got 2 votes for yes and 1 Ruth's vote. So the yays have it. Does anyone have a question? I do. I love that quote about your starting point. I think that's, for those of us that have been teaching for 30 years, that starting point seems to move around, but still there is a place to start.
Absolutely. Well, that's all right if there's no questions, because I think that means that you get more time to go hit up the bars and things, right?
It is Louisiana. Wait, Ruth says, can you expand upon how you might start a little one with a musical concept, such as the 6/8 songs for little ones you mentioned? what might you do to help prepare them for 6/8 later?
Oh, that's such a great question, isn't it? And of course, she would know the answer to this, so she's kind of like setting me up right now. But I'm a very big believer of the kinesthetic learning, and so maybe playing that for them, a 6/8 song like "Row, Row, Row Your Boat," having them putting into their body and saying, "Can you find the pulse?" Of course. Now trying to divide that pulse into 2 or 3. So if we go row, row, row your boat. Row, 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 row your boat, and so on and so on. It's just not natural. Now say, does this feel more natural? Row, 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 row your boat, 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 jet, jet. And then they'd say, oh, I like that, And then you're teaching them, okay, well, what if we said this was 1, 4? Can you fill in the blanks? And they'd say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you're saying, great job. Okay, so then you draw in 6 little symbols on the board, and you say, okay, now we're going to draw this little line and separate it from the next set of 6, and so on and so on. And we say, just for fun, let's make them look really cool and beam them together. And then you just introduce music from what they already know. Of course, we all know that is take them from what they know to the unknown. And so the known is, of course, how they feel and how they hear it and feel it. And then the unknown, of course, is the visual representation, the notation. And we just teach them that. And we say, that's so cool. And, I think that's the key, is just realizing, oh, we're not teaching them anything new in 6/8 time. They've already known it, but we are maybe teaching them how to show visual representation of it. And, that's, of course, through iconic and symbolic representation. But we don't dwell on that. We don't say it's going to be really important that you do this right. It's more important that they understand, cool, now here's a way you can see what you're actually singing and doing. And then they go, cool. And I always tell them, I say, it's our secret language, because now I can send Ruth a message using these notes and rhythms, and she will know what it means, but maybe my mom doesn't know. So we can tell each other secret messages. And kids like that. They like being mischievous and devious.
That never goes away.
Yeah, that's interesting. I saw Ruth's comment about my daughter struggling with 6/8. I actually know Ruth's daughter, and she's one of the most brilliant little musicians I've ever met. And again, wouldn't that be interesting to go back to see how was she taught 6/8 from the start? I always wish I could go back in time and be a fly on the wall and notice how people learn things.
I often wonder how it would be if you describe to a young person that's in music and you say, can you envision in your mind a TREE? And they can get that immediately, but the idea of musical concepts sometimes is they miss out on that totally.
Absolutely.
Maybe if we started much earlier. We're getting the thank yous now, which means that people are going to be dashing from virtual room to virtual room. Oh, Ruth is back with her phone. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I know that everyone is looking forward to Julie being with us and working with our mixed group. We're very, very proud of our singers. We know that she will push them and that they will achieve greatness over the 15 hours of rehearsal that she's going to get with them. And we're going to be giving our best to her. And hopefully we'll get to do that in March, last part of March. So everyone stay safe, stay healthy. And I will thank Julie for giving us this time and giving us this wonderful, wonderful session.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.